People were very interested in Sherri's disappearance from the beginning. First, there was local news coverage, then national news coverage, then international coverage, which is something that families of the missing would really like to all experience. But sadly, that is not how it works. Oftentimes, local news, national news, doesn't even cover missing people. But there was a lot of intrigue and concern around Sherri's case from the beginning.
Hello everybody, and today we're talking about the case of Sherri Papini. I decided to cover this because I knew about this case beforehand, and I was just absolutely shocked when I heard it was faked. Well, allegedly for legal reasons. It hasn't been proven in the court of law, but we're going to be talking about that today. And I've talked about people who've faked Tourette's and people who've faked DID for money and views. I see this as no different, but much worse. But I'm going to assume most of you have no idea about this case or what it's about really. So I'll explain what happened before the truth came out. On November 2nd, 2016, her husband came home and found she and the kids weren't home. He waited a little bit, then called the daycare. Found out she never picked up the kids from daycare. Then went on a search down the street and found her phone neatly placed at the end of their own street. Her husband frantically calls 911 and reports her as missing. Then there were many searches for her from police and volunteers.
Federal, state, and local authorities collaborated on the investigation, and volunteers also helped organize searches, and tons of people would come out for these. Search and rescue teams with canines also searched the area from where she went missing, but nothing was found. And according to the official press release from Shasta County, more than 20 search warrants were executed in an attempt to find Sherri. They also conducted interviews with friends, family, and past acquaintances.
Just using a map and we're doing some grid searches.
The longer that someone's missing, that's a very critical time within the first, 24 hours.
And while police are searching for Sherri, Keith starts doing media appearances right away.
I'm coming, honey. I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can. And I love you. Bring her home. Bring her home.
And because of all the press her husband did, an anonymous donor came forward to give her a reward of $50,000 for her safe return. Although no one claimed that reward, and then it was bumped to $100,000 and became a bounty on her kidnappers. There was also a GoFundMe to hire a private investigator or just to help all around with the investigation, and it raised about $50,000. After 3 weeks, Sherri was found on the side of a highway with bindings on her and injuries all over her body.
Sherri was missing a total of 22 days and discovered 150 miles away from home. It was just after 4 a.m. when a woman named Allison Sutton was driving her 14-year-old daughter through Yolo County, California. And while she's driving, she spots a blonde woman wearing a brown flannel shirt who's desperately trying to flag someone down. This woman looked dirty, she looked scared, and Allison knew that something was really wrong here.
She had like a wide-eyed, panicked kind of look. I was startled to see her. It was dark, and she pretty much just came out of nowhere. If I had swerved to the right at least a little bit, I would have hit her with my car. I figured if she was willing to risk being hit by a car trying to get somebody's attention, that she must really need some help.
She calls 911 and reports seeing this woman on the northbound on-ramp to Interstate 5. And she also appeared to be quite emaciated. Video surveillance from a local church actually caught a glimpse of Sherri, and she appears to just be running back and forth through the parking lot, most likely looking for someone to help her. So, of course, they take Sherri right to the hospital.
She wasn't the most cooperative with the police. Then the police gave her husband a recorder to bring in to the hospital to talk with her about what happened. This tape is where they got most of their information about what happened to Sherri. She told her husband she was kidnapped at gunpoint by 2 Hispanic women. They branded her shoulder and bruised her daily. She had bruises in different stages of healing, and she was emaciated. And oddly enough, they did not find 2 females' DNA on her when they did a swab test. They found a male and a female DNA. When she was asked about this, she denied there was ever a male of any kind. Now, this was the evidence that broke the case. They eventually did find the owner of the male DNA. They'd find out it was her ex-boyfriend. Just a side note, if a family member does an Ancestry.com or 23andMe, that does get logged in a database, and the police can use it to find relative matches. And this is what they did. A family member of her ex used Ancestry or something like it. Then they backtracked and found, oh, this family member dated Sherri in the past. Dug through his trash, took a swab from the trash, and got an exact match. After this, they took him in for questioning and he spilled everything. And before I get into all that, I just wanted to talk about all the suspicious things that came out about Sherri's past.
But of course, something felt off to many of you and many people in law enforcement and many people just in the public who have been following this case since day one. And even though this man who she had been talking to was cleared of any involvement, people were very sus. And then an article was published that really made people sus because it exposed a part of Sherri's past that was less than ideal. This story was posted by the Sacramento Bee in 2017, and it included details of a time in 2000 when Sherri's sister believed that Sherri had broken into her house through her back door. It also stated that the day that Sherri was thought to have broken into her sister's home, she vandalized her own home, where she lived with her parents. In 2003, her father also reported an unauthorized bank withdrawal and suspected that Sherri, who was 21 at the time, was responsible. And lastly, Sherri's mother had to call the police to report that Sherri had been hurting herself and threatened to blame her mom for her self-inflicted wounds.
I would say that's all an interesting coincidence, wouldn't you think? A history of lying, manipulating, creating stories. Allegedly, of course. But still, interesting. Now with all that out of the way, let's continue with our story.
For the youth group, and they confirmed that Sherri was incredibly problematic, that she often lied and exaggerated stories for attention. And in addition to all of this man told investigators that the two communicated solely via prepaid cell phones. The phones were corroborated by investigators after they discovered two prepaid phones that communicated with one another, one at her approximate location and one at his. They also performed cell site analysis and dug through toll records to show that James traveled to Redding, California on the day of Sherri's disappearance, just like he said he had. And cell phone records also prove that they were texting each other the morning that she went missing. And James's cousin also came forward and said that during the dates of her disappearance, he had actually seen her at James's place twice.
So, more evidence that she's a little sketchy. A testimony from a family member of his, phone records. Can't really hide from phone records. And now let me talk about the branding. Well, according to her ex-boyfriend, he assisted her in branding herself. He went to the store, bought her a wood burner, and she told him where to place the brand, which is disturbing. And to our knowledge, all of the other wounds were self-inflicted by her. Her bruises upon bruises, the fact that she was emaciated, she wasn't eating, she was staying out of the sun. She was going for authenticity here.
Right before Thanksgiving, Sherri decides it's time to go home and stage her reappearance. So James has a friend of his rent a car, and he used that to drive Sherri back up to Northern California. And car rental records confirm this, as well as the odometer reading on the car. And when they asked James why he didn't go to the police after he released Sherri, he simply said that if the truth ever came out, the police would find him and he would not hesitate to tell the truth then. And investigators have found even more evidence that backs up James's story. First of all, James's work schedule shows that he took the 1st and 2nd of November off, which were not normally days he had off. And the room in his place that Sherri had been held captive in matched the description of what she said she was held captive in. So she really put herself through the experience.
The reason why I wanted to cover this case is because I cannot wrap my head around how somebody could do this to themselves in the first place, and then second of all, have no shame in what they've done. Like, we're about to go into the segment of how much money this woman made off of faking her own kidnapping.
To determine that she had violated the law by making false statements to a federal agent. But obviously, this was not her only charge. You may remember that a GoFundMe page was started for Sherri with the intention that the funds would be used directly by the family for hiring people to look into her disappearance. And the page raised a total of $49,070. And 2 weeks after Sherri returned, Keith wrote a check for $31,808 from the GoFundMe's bank account to himself and deposited it right into his account. He also wrote a second check for $1,160 from the GoFundMe's account to Sherri, and it was deposited into her account. And then a week later, on December 13th, 2016, Keith used $8,202 of the GoFundMe's money to pay off some of his personal credit cards. And Sherri did the same thing, but she used $3,053. The remaining money was discovered to have been used on personal expenses for the Papini family.
So fake your own kidnapping and make bank, right? That's a lot of money from people who were concerned about her, just going to their credit cards and personal expenses. Granted, I don't know. No one really knows for sure if her husband was in on this or if he ever knew. So maybe it's not his fault, but she definitely knew this was all fake. This was all money that she did not deserve to have. And she didn't stop there. No. She decided she wanted more money. That $50,000, not enough. So she signed up for benefits for victims in California.
But the real fraud comes in when Sherri applied for the California Victims Compensation Board for financial assistance. This organization gives financial help to victims of violent crime. So she used her fake abduction story to make money, to profit. Between 2017 and 2021, Sherri received approximately 35 payments totaling over $30,000, which brings her total of stolen money from the public and this department up to $230,000. So she was charged in court, and despite this, a judge did grant her bail. Her bond was set at $120,000, and she also had a variety of conditions that she had to agree to in order to be released. These conditions included surrendering her passport, agreeing to remain in one part of the state, giving up any firearms or weapons, not consuming drugs and alcohol, as well as undergoing a psychiatric evaluation program. And she managed to post bail with the help of her husband and parents. And Sherri being released from jail has obviously been incredibly controversial. Many, including the prosecuting attorneys, believe that she's a flight risk. Now, if Sherri is convicted, she faces up to 20 years in prison. She also faces fines up to $500,000, both for mail fraud and for lying to federal agents.
So it's not hard to say that she's facing some charges right now. I don't believe she's being necessarily charged for the GoFundMe, but that's just an added little character note. The main thing is lying to a federal agent and the mail fraud, which is claiming the benefits for a fake kidnapping story. And I believe the average maximum per year for that compensation is $25,000. So, if she was getting the maximum, she was stealing about that much per year. And that could have went to people who are actual victims in violent crimes. And it's just disgusting. And this makes me truly sad, because I was one of those people that believed her. I know a lot of people didn't believe her, and now we see why. But I did try to give that benefit of the doubt and say, well, why would this person hurt themselves that badly? What would they gain from it? Well, seems if it wasn't money, it was definitely attention for her. According to people in her past, she did like to seek attention a lot. So I believe the original currency was attention, and then the money became her bonus later. I think that's enough being disappointed in humanity for one day. Please let me know what you think down in the comments below. Did you know about this case beforehand? Are you as shocked as I am? I know people do bad things, is what I cover on my channel, but my goodness, this was definitely the worst one. But please stay safe out there, take care of yourselves, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!